What's going on? Welcome to this Lacrosse Now update. I'm Travis Eldridge. Gigantic news in the sport today as Johns Hopkins and head coach Dave Pietramala have decided to part ways. The school made that announcement in a press release here on Tuesday, ending Petro's 20-year run as the Blue Jays head man. He leaves as the school's all-time leader in wins. His accomplishments, as you can see at Hopkins as a head coach, speak for themselves. 18 NCAA tournaments, 7 Final Fours, 2 national championships. But the program was struggling this year, off to a 2-4 start before the season was canceled. They had not made it back to championship weekend since just one time since 2008. So there was a bit of a drought there. Of course, also an All-American defenseman as a Blue Jays player, considered one of the best in the college game. So we now bring in our analyst, Evan Washburn, for more on this. Evan, with the landscape of where college sports and honestly just everybody here in this country is right now, how surprising is this move?
Well, I guess at this point, Travis, good to be with you as always. Nothing should be surprising just with the way that the last 6 weeks has presented itself. But specific to this, yeah, it still caught you off guard when you pull up your phone and there's an alert there to say that Dave Pietramala is no longer the head coach at Johns Hopkins. He's so synonymous with that school and with that program for all the reasons you just laid out, from what he's done as a coach, what he did as a player. As you dig a little bit deeper, you start to realize that this is something that not necessarily was bound to happen, but was in the cards. But I think what makes right now such a surprising move, or it to be a surprise to use your terms, is that this is a time in college lacrosse, college sports, where there's not going to be a lot of movement, where there's not going to be a lot of turnover in programs. There's not going to be a lot of openings. And you just created one at one of the blue bloods, and you have now one of the most decorated and well-respected coaches available. But I'm not exactly sure where he would find a home if he wants to be a head coach next season. And then obviously turning the page to who would be the next head coach at Hopkins. So I know I got ahead of you there a little bit with that, but that's where my mind immediately went.
Obviously, the results weren't there. I mentioned just one Final Four since 2008. Syracuse is in a similar type situation when they've struggled in terms of getting to championship weekend. But you look at Hopkins. Last year, they needed the 2 wins over Maryland down the stretch. They got both of them, but they start 2-4. How much does the results go into this play into this, where, I mean, they just weren't there for the alumni and the donors and everybody involved in this program?
I'm not sure this year's results would have been or should have been a large factor in this decision to mutually part ways. And obviously there's contractual things here too, where that can often be the determining factor. The last report was that Pietramala's contract, this contract extension that he signed, I think in 2015, was set to end in 2020. So again, because of the oddity of where we find ourselves in the landscape, you don't know what was presented to him possibly for next season, if anything. But if they were using this year as the reasoning, then that to me would be extremely short-sighted. Obviously, we know they were dealing with injuries, most notably to Joey Epstein, who's their most talented player. Look, the program, yes, had taken a turn to not being punching a ticket to Final Four weekend every year, which it seemed to be, especially in the late 2008 to 2010 range. But I still think there was a lot there, and I am a strong believer that Dave Pietramala would figure out a way to get this program back to where it needed to be, understanding that the landscape around him has changed. And it was no longer just plug and play with the guys from Baltimore, the guys from Long Island to fill out a roster. I think even though he had guys as far back as Pierce Bassett from Arizona, I thought as the game grew, Hopkins' stranglehold on everything became less strong.
Look, at the end of the day, Petro was one of the best players in program history, one of the best coaches in program history. You now move on from that. What does this mean for Blue Jays program?
Well, I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And look, it's a new regime there and a new athletic director. And that's part of the story here, you have to think, because of who was with Petro at his most recent contract and really took that program to another level. You think about some of the facilities they have and the complex they have there at Homewood Field and the tradition. But is that still the goal? Is that still the vision of this athletic department? They want to invest everything into the men's lacrosse program and then have everything around it at the end of the day be D3 sports, which, as we well know, are not put on that pedestal given that amount of financial backing. So I think those questions have to be sorted through as we look towards what this program will be. I'm of the belief that even if there's a step back from the athletic program or department on how to view lacrosse, you can't ever look at Hopkins at anything other than one of the top programs in the country, the Notre Dame of college lacrosse.
Yeah, that kind of falls into my where is this job now? Like, they're a blue blood program. Where does it rank in terms of the jobs that could possibly be out there in college lacrosse?
Well, I think it's right up there with some of the most desirable. But I do think if you're a candidate here over the next few months, as they down to where you find yourself as a candidate. If you are already a pre-existing head coach at a top 10 to top 15 program that has, a strong financial backing from its athletic department, again, this is in a vacuum, not knowing what it's going to look like in the next 6 months, then I'm not necessarily sure you quickly exit that place to go to Hopkins if you don't know how they're going to view the program. If nothing's going to change and they still at Hopkins view men's lacrosse as the thing they're going to put up there, because it's a marketing tool. As you look at admissions, it's their college football team, it's their Duke basketball team. So if that's still the case, then it's an uber desirable job. If it's not, then I view it more as if you're at a lower program or you're an assistant and you think, well, there's no better place to start my head coaching career or take another step in it than moving to Hopkins.
From the outside, it still feels and looks like a gigantic job, at least for now, and it's going to be a gigantic opening as we head into a really weird, unusual offseason of college lacrosse. Evan, we appreciate the time. You will continue to follow this story. We'll have more lacrosse now, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on Lac Sports Network.